Number 1. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Intervlog, where Africa speaks for itself, calmly, clearly, and confidently.
Que les citoyens burkinabés demandeurs de visa américain devront désormais se rendre à Lomé au Togo pour les formalités. Est-ce que vous confirmez?
Alors, je dois dire que c'est avec surprise, effectivement, que nous avons reçu ce soir même une note verbale de l'ambassade des États-Unis à Ouagadougou.
Today, we turn our lens to a story that echoes far beyond the borders of Burkina Faso. A story that resonates with the very spirit of dignity, sovereignty, and moral courage. It is the story of a nation that stood tall when others bent low, of a leader who refused to trade humanity for money, of a moment when Burkina Faso said no, not in anger, not in pride, but in principle. Recently, news emerged that the government of Burkina Faso, under the leadership of Captain Ibrahim Traoré, refused a proposal from the Trump administration to accept deportees from the United States. Not just Burkinabe nationals, but also non-citizens expelled from U.S. soil. In an era where power often speaks louder than morality, this decision has reverberated across Africa and beyond. It is more than a diplomatic act. It is a declaration of who Burkina Faso is, and what Africa could be when guided by self-respect and conviction. According to Foreign Minister Karamoko Jean-Marie Traoré, the U.S. proposal asked whether Burkina Faso would agree to receive deportees who were not Burkinabe nationals. In essence, the Trump administration sought to relocate individuals from other nations to Burkinabe territory under what has been called a third country deportation program. Burkina Faso's answer was simple and firm: no. The foreign minister described the proposal as indecent and totally contrary to the value of dignity that lies at the heart of Captain Ibrahim Traoré's vision. He went further to emphasize that Burkina Faso is a land of dignity, not deportation. This declaration was not made in defiance but in defense of national identity, of moral coherence, and of African integrity. Just hours after that statement, the U.S. Embassy in Ouagadougou suspended most of its visa services, redirecting applications to neighboring Togo. The reason for this abrupt move remains unclear, but Burkina Faso's foreign minister called it a possible pressure tactic. It was, as many observers note, a test of sovereignty, and one that Burkina Faso passed with composure. To understand the magnitude of this refusal, one must first understand what was being proposed. Under the Trump administration, the United States developed secretive agreements with certain African nations to accept deportees, including individuals who had no ties whatsoever to those countries. In return, these nations received millions of dollars in aid or border management funding. Human Rights Watch reported that Eswatini was promised $5.1 million, while Rwanda would receive $7.5 million for accepting deportees. In other words, the arrangement was transactional, a human barter wrapped in diplomatic paperwork. The policy raised concerns among human rights organizations, many of which argued that it turned Africa into a dumping ground for people deemed unwanted elsewhere. Burkina Faso's rejection, therefore, was not merely political, it was philosophical. It was a statement that Africans are not commodities, and Africa is not for sale. There is an African proverb that says, "If you sell your shadow, you will walk without honor in the sun." Captain Ibrahim Traoré's government understood that principle deeply. By refusing to accept this proposal, regardless of the incentives offered, Burkina Faso reaffirmed a truth often forgotten in international politics: that dignity cannot be bought and sovereignty cannot be negotiated. The world may have expected a small, landlocked, conflict-battered nation to accept whatever was placed on the table by a global superpower. But Burkina Faso's decision shattered that assumption. It sent a quiet but powerful message: that size does not determine strength, and economic hardship does not erase moral clarity. At the core of this event lies a clash of values. For some governments, pragmatism often outweighs principle. For others, survival dictates submission. But for Captain Ibrahim Traoré, leadership seems rooted in something far more fundamental, a belief that a nation's worth is measured not by what it receives, but by what it refuses to compromise. When the Burkinabe foreign minister described the U.S. proposal as indecent, he was not engaging in rhetoric. He was invoking a cultural and moral framework that prioritizes human dignity above all else. Africa has, for centuries, been the theater of external influence, where resources, policies, and even people have been negotiated as commodities. But moments like this remind the world that Africa can and must set its own moral compass. Why did Captain Ibrahim Traoré reject the offer? The reasons, when examined closely, reveal a deeper philosophy of governance. First, national dignity. Under Traoré, Burkina Faso has emphasized self-reliance and honor as central pillars of governance. The country has reasserted its identity on the world stage as a land unwilling to be dictated to, no matter the pressure. Second, moral integrity. Accepting non-citizen deportees would have effectively made Burkina Faso a holding ground for people who have no link to the land, culture, or community. It would have created a precedent where foreign powers could treat African nations as extension spaces for their domestic policies. Third, Pan-African solidarity. Traoré's stance also protects the dignity of other African nations. By refusing the proposal, he signaled that no African government should participate in policies that undermine another's sovereignty or humanity. And fourth, national stability. Integrating deportees with no national ties could risk social tension, strain limited resources, and undermine internal security, especially in a country already managing the challenges of displacement due to conflict and climate change. In short, Traoré's no was not a gesture of defiance. It was a decision grounded in logic, principle, and national responsibility. Intervlog observes that Burkina Faso's action offers a broader lesson for the continent. Too often, African nations face difficult choices between financial assistance and moral autonomy. Some yield under the weight of economic necessity, accepting arrangements that undermine sovereignty in exchange for temporary relief. But, as an African proverb says, "He who drinks water from a stranger's calabash must remember the hand that holds it." What Captain Traoré demonstrates is that Africa can and must make decisions that preserve its long-term dignity rather than short-term gain. Other West African nations, and indeed the entire continent, can learn from this example. To Nigeria, Ghana, Côte d'Ivoire, Senegal, and all nations navigating the balance between external influence and internal independence, the message from Ouagadougou is clear. Africa must define the terms of its partnerships. A sovereign Africa cannot be both the architect and the tenant of its destiny. The United States deportation arrangements with Eswatini, South Sudan, Rwanda, Ghana, and Uganda have raised significant questions. In Eswatini, the government accepted $5.1 million in funding. Rwanda reportedly received $7.5 million. Meanwhile, deportees sent to Ghana claimed they were held under harsh conditions in a military facility. These incidents highlight the humanitarian cost of transactional diplomacy, where human beings become the currency of state cooperation. By contrast, Burkina Faso's decision interrupts this pattern. It signals that African countries can stand on moral ground even when financial pressure looms large. It also redefines what true partnership should look like. One built on respect, not exploitation, on mutual benefit, not manipulation. One might ask, what does Burkina Faso gain from saying no? In purely material terms, perhaps nothing. But in moral and strategic terms, it gains everything that truly matters. The decision reinforces the country's credibility as a principled state actor. It earns respect from African citizens across borders who are weary of governments bowing to external dictates. And it strengthens national pride, a critical resource in times of reconstruction and transformation. As another proverb reminds us, a tree with deep roots fears no wind. Burkina Faso's roots, in dignity, integrity, and sovereignty, are growing deeper with each principled decision it makes. Here at Intervlog, we approach every story with calm objectivity and respect for truth. But even through that neutral lens, certain actions stand out as defining moments in the story of modern Africa. Captain Ibrahim Traoré's government continues to redefine leadership, not through speeches or slogans, but through concrete choices that elevate principle over pressure. When Burkina Faso rejected that offer, it wasn't merely protecting itself. It was protecting the image of Africa. It was saying to the world, Africa is not a place to be negotiated over. Africa is a partner to be respected. This episode also underscores the need for Africa to speak with one voice. In the face of global power dynamics, African unity is not a dream. It is a necessity. If Burkina Faso stands alone today, it does so as a symbol of what all of Africa could achieve together. Imagine a continent where every government upholds the dignity of its people above external pressures. Imagine a future where Africa defines its humanitarian policies, manages its borders, and speaks collectively against any form of exploitation. As an old Burkinabe saying goes, when one drum beats alone, the rhythm fades quickly. But when many drums beat together, the rhythm becomes a song. It is time for Africa's drums to beat in harmony. Throughout modern history, great movements have begun not with major nations, but with moral nations, those willing to stand for something higher. When Ghana said no to colonial rule, others followed. When Burkina Faso now says no to undignified proposals, it lights a new path. This act may not make global headlines for long, but its echo will last. It tells young Africans that sovereignty is not just about flags and borders, it is about choices, values, and courage. Captain Ibrahim Traoré may not seek applause, but his leadership invites reflection. It reminds us that the power to say no is sometimes the most powerful form of leadership. Burkina Faso will continue to face diplomatic tests, as every independent-minded nation does. But by standing firm now, it has set a standard for how African nations can engage the world without surrendering their principles. Refusing to host deportees who are not its citizens does not mean refusing cooperation. It means insisting on fairness, respect, and equality. In the long run, this stance may even strengthen Burkina Faso's partnerships, for true respect often begins when one learns to say no. To our brothers and sisters in West Africa and across the continent, let us take note. Africa's progress will not come from the charity of others, but from the character of its choices. It will come when nations like Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and others place dignity above dependency. Let this be a continental turning point, where Africa defines the terms of its engagement, sets its own moral compass, and leads the conversation on human rights from an African perspective. The world respects those who respect themselves. And as this episode has shown, dignity, once chosen, becomes contagious. Permit Intervlog to end with a parable. There was once a lion who was offered food every day by a traveler in exchange for its freedom. The lion refused, saying, "A full stomach is good, but freedom is better." That lion's roar echoed through the forest as a reminder that dignity is the foundation of all sovereignty. Burkina Faso, under Captain Ibrahim Traoré, has roared, not in hostility, but in principle. It has reminded the world that Africa's dignity is not for sale, not negotiable, and not disposable. As Intervlog observes, this is more than a diplomatic story. It is a lesson in leadership, a reflection of conscience, and a vision for the continent's future. May other African nations draw wisdom from this moment. May they remember that true power lies not in how loudly one speaks, but in how firmly one stands. And may Burkina Faso's choice inspire a new generation of African leaders to say, with calm conviction and quiet pride, that Africa's dignity will never be traded for convenience. Because as another African proverb teaches, the path of honor may be narrow, but it leads to a wide tomorrow. This is the end of our program today. See you on Intervlog same time tomorrow. Thanks for watching. please like and subscribe to my channel and press the bell icon to get new video updates. Thank you for watching Intervlog. Thank you.